A.S. Neal, the headmaster of Summerhill School, specializes in problem children and says that he wants boys and girls that other schools find troublesome, lazy, dull, antisocial. Here is my school, he says to parents. Absolute freedom to work or to play. Take it or leave it.
Spent 1 year where I didn't go to school at all during the war. I got very behind academically with all the classical subjects. I really didn't know any mathematics or anything like that.
J'étais dyslexique, donc je vois tout à l'envers, je lis de droite à gauche. Et à l'école, j'ai souffert à cause de ça parce qu'ils ne le comprenaient pas, ils me tordaient les oreilles, enfin, ils me faisaient souffrir.
Summerhill. My Sunday school teacher in church brought it to the class for a discussion, and I liked the idea of the school so much that she let me borrow her book. And I made a deal with my mother that if she wrote to Neil and asked if I could go to Summerhill, and he said yes, I would go to Summerhill. And if he said no, I would willingly stay at this school for unhappy, disturbed children.
My first realization that I was going to be sent away was staying with my grandmother. And my father was talking to his mother about this, and she broke down in tears and said, please don't send her away. You know, I'll look after her. This is a terrible thing to send such a small child away. So this was my first realization that that something very strange and sort of, it seemed very dreadful because I'd never seen my grandmother cry before.
What's the boy? There you are, he's doing what we used to do. Hey, are you from Summerhill?
Yeah.
Little lad, he looks frozen.
No lights, which we...
No lights.
I got chased by a policeman up the hill with a bike with no lights on.
Really? Did he catch you?
Yeah.
He did?
You from the do-as-you-please school, boy?
What is Summerhill like? Well, for one thing, lessons are optional. Children can go to them or stay away from them, for years if they want to. There is a timetable, but only for the teachers.
Summerhill, certainement, était la liberté. C'était dans un parc assez spacieux, surtout pour les tout-petits. Et on était libre d'aller partout, de grimper dans les arbres, de fouiller en terre, de faire n'importe quoi.
Obviously, it belonged to children. It was unlike any other place I'd ever seen. It had bikes all over the place and ropes hanging from the trees, and the children just seemed like they owned the place.
At the beginning, it must have been, I was in the woods a lot, climbing trees and making huts. We used to make little dens with, you know, maybe 4 of us or something like that. And we'd sort of go in and we'd, I don't know, have little fantasy worlds, really. You know, you'd sort of take your tea in there and pretend you lived in there and things. We always used to think we'd like to sleep overnight in there, but that was never realized.
We played games with bows and arrows, with wooden sticks used as swords with pretend guns, and we would have opposing armies and we would have battles one with the other.
Bah, 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 bah. You're dead. 10 seconds, get that, 10 seconds, you know. And yeah, I made a lot of those. And then later on, I was much more serious, and I made a guitar body or made a chair, you know, things like that.
There's plenty to do, which is, as far as I'm concerned, just as valuable as going to the lessons. And no, it didn't. I mean, you weren't made to feel guilty. There was no pressure, so obviously you wouldn't really feel bad about that.
After 75 years, Summerhill still goes against official thinking. For a long time, the Ministry of Education considered it a caricature of a real school because it operated without authority or hierarchy. At the outset, part of the British press christened it the do-as-you-please school and focused on its most sensational and scandalous aspects. It is a school where the children are allowed to swear, smoke, skip classes if they feel like it, know all about sex, and call the headmaster that silly-ass Neil to his face. In conventional schools, however, pupils were trained to fit the mold demanded by society. Boys and girls were segregated, and corporal punishment was permitted. In creating Summerhill, Neil broke radically with all existing educational theory. He wanted a school which would meet the needs of the child, rather than the other way round. The world turned upside down.
The life of the children was just so, so rich and eventful. There were so many things going on outside that I stopped going to lessons, together with a whole group of my peers. And I didn't actually then return to lessons until I was about 14.
I'd had plenty of time to play around and decide what I was going to do and which lessons I'd like to try, and, you know. So by the time I got to the classrooms, I was very much aware and, you know, I'd listen. That's the thing, you see, because I wanted to go there, and I walked in of my own free will to the lessons.
C'est à nous de faire les décisions. C'était pas aux adultes. Normalement, c'est toujours aux adultes. Oui, c'est nous qui décidons. Les enfants, normalement, ils ne savent rien parce qu'ils sont irresponsables, etc. On suppose que les enfants laissés à eux-mêmes n'arriveraient jamais à rien. Ça démontrait une confiance envers les enfants que Neil avait et que l'école donnait aux enfants.
Obviously, a school that makes active children sit at desks studying mostly useless subjects is a bad school. It is a good school only for those who believe in such a school, for those uncreative citizens who want docile, uncreative children, who will fit into a civilization whose standard of success is money.
Summerhill kids, there'd been a long tradition of kids playing boogie-woogie and blues on the piano without a teacher. They just would hand it down. You'd learn a few things from someone who was better at it than you. And then you'd teach a few things to the next kid. And I just got in that line and spent a whole year playing a simple 3-chord blues in C. And I just played that one thing over and over until I was completely comfortable with it. And then I joined the jazz band and started to play other kind of music and learn how to play from chords, and, you know. But I never did have a teacher. I've never had a teacher.
I started when I was about 13, so I had quite some years to really play a lot. I mean, I remember when I was really into it, down at Summerhill, I used to play, once in the morning from about 10 till lunchtime, and then I'll go back from 2 till about 4, and then even at night, you know, at times I'll go back from about 6 until about 9, you know, so I'm sure the neighbours were probably furious, quite furious from time to time, but I had a good time, yeah, yeah.
another freedom that comes with that you could even say connect it to the piano is a freedom to fail. I had been branded a failure before I got to Summerhill, and it was a terrible thing. I had let everyone down, and there was great shame attached to it. I learned at Summerhill that there's something respectable about being a failure in the world's eyes if you are a success in your own. If you achieve what you are set out to achieve, you manage to achieve your goal, even if the world, it isn't a goal the world appreciates, as they hadn't appreciated my cartooning or my, or my piano playing eventually. It didn't matter.
I personally, and a lot of people who were at Summerhill, looked forward to the holidays in the way that most children in boarding schools do. I think we had more, it was more enjoyable at school than it was in the holidays.
Summerhill for us was the real world, and life outside it was slightly problematical and difficult, and people just behaved stupidly. So it wasn't until we came back to Summerhill at the beginning of term that we could sort of breathe a sigh of relief and just think, right, here's where we can get things done.
I think I'd wanted to please adults and to do well for them, but had had great personal difficulties sometimes. And to find myself in a world where you didn't actually have to please the adults. You had to get along with the community. That was a great thing.
Summerhill is an island, and it is not part of a larger social unit. It has to be an island. Out of 100 parents, what percentage would approve of free choice in attending lessons? From the word go, I should have to compromise with what I believe to be truth. Although I write and say what I think of society, if I tried to reform society by action, society would kill me as a public danger. My primary job is not the reformation of society, but the bringing of happiness to some few children.
J'étais toujours quand même coléreux, mais je n'avais pas de cause d'irritation, sauf un petit garçon qui s'appelait Jimmy, qui était américain. Et le pauvre bougre, il devait être malheureux. Il était un enfant difficile. Lui, il n'allait jamais en classe, par contre. Et il m'a taquiné. Alors, je cours après et je commence à lui taper dessus. Il y avait un attroupement autour de moi. Il tombe par terre, je me mets à cheval sur lui et puis je commence à lui taper dessus. Et les enfants, il y en avait, je sais pas moi, une bonne dizaine, tous autour en rond. Et puis tout d'un coup, je m'arrête et je les regarde comme ça autour. Alors je m'excuse, ça me fait pleurer quand à chaque fois que je me rappelle de cette histoire, je pleure. Je regarde autour de moi et puis je les vois comme ça, puis il y a un petit garçon qui me dit tu sais, tu es le premier enfant qui tape ici, on n'a jamais tapé. Et quand il m'a dit ça, je me suis effondré en larmes, et ça me reprend, c'est drôle. Même après 50 ans, une émotion pareille, elle reste. On ne peut pas s'en défaire. Et après ça, je me suis plus jamais battu.
Oui, tu sortais de ta solitude.
Oui, exactement, c'est ça. Je pense que cet amour des enfants a surmonté, m'a comblé, m'a soigné, je pense.
I'll give you an instance of boys from America, 9. His father writes, my boy's a normal boy, but he hates lessons. The boy comes, his face is full with hate. He's a destroyer, he's a bully, he's a thief, and obviously his father didn't know what to do with him. He dumped him on us. You can't send him home. So we have to wait for years till this boy becomes social, which he does, of course, in the end. But you can't become social by punishment. Punishment never cured anybody, but I hate using the word love because it's almost a dirty word nowadays. I like Homer Lane's phrase, being on the side of the child, which I think we are. That's the only way to cure children, is to approve of them.
What was Neil's position in the school?
Of course, he was head of the school, but he tended to keep rather in the background. He did not impose himself on the school. He was always there at the meetings. He was usually there at the Saturday night dances. He did some teaching. I did part of my maths work with him as teacher. But often you might not see him for several days at a time, and he would keep in the background. So he tried to let the school get on and run without him having to impose himself.
He would often sit very quietly through the meetings, and if something was going on that he didn't like, he would just sort of gently shake his head, but he wouldn't intrude. So he was a very comforting presence, but not a forceful one. He didn't intrude into the daily life at all.
Un jour, j'entends que Neil veut me voir dans son bureau. Je tape à la porte qui était déjà un peu entrouverte et il me dit de rentrer. Je rentre et puis je vois Neil assis derrière son bureau. Gentiment, il me demande de m'asseoir dans un fauteuil face de lui. Et puis, souvent, il laissait un long silence avant de parler. Il avait sa bouche qui tombait comme ça, qui était toujours un peu humide sur les côtés. Et puis, avec son accent écossais fort, que j'arrivais à comprendre à peu près, il me dit « Pourquoi tu es l'enfant le plus heureux de l'école ?» Je dis « Moi ?» Il me dit « Oui, on te voit rire tout le temps, tu es toujours de bonne humeur, tu es toujours gai, tu es toujours drôle, tu es toujours au-dessus de tout. » Mais il me dit « En vérité, c'est pas tellement le cas. » Alors moi je dis « Mais si, je suis très content, je suis très très heureux. » « Tu es heureux à l'école? » « Oui, je suis très heureux. » Il me dit « Mais la nuit, tu es aussi heureux que ça, comme ça ?»« Je sais que tu es pas si heureux que ça. » Et alors tout d'un coup, je me suis effondré en larmes. J'ai pleuré parce que j'ai senti que Neil savait que presque toutes les nuits, je pleurais dans mon lit. Je lui ai dit « Mais comment tu sais que je pleure la nuit ?» Parce que je l'avais dit à personne. Et alors il me dit « Oh ben c'est pas difficile », il me dit avec un sourire. Il me dit « C'est pas difficile, j'ai qu'à regarder ta peinture », il m'a dit. Tout d'un coup, plus tard, j'ai regardé mes tableaux, je me suis aperçu de la tragédie de ce que j'étais en train de faire. Je peignais des choses vachement tragiques. Oh. 53. Il y a une vache de violence là-dedans, hein?
Education is learning. It's from the neck upwards. You take that program, the top of the form, where you've got a lot of walking encyclopedias who know everything. By the way, I can only do 10% of the answers. And that's the popular idea of education, but education is deeper than that. Education is living. And the schools don't touch an important part of life, the emotions. They only touch the head mostly.
Tous les samedis soirs, on dansait et on adorait danser. C'est à Summerhill que j'ai la première fois que j'ai senti la hanche d'une femme dans ma main. Petit, en tant qu'enfant, c'est pas comme un adulte, hein, c'est pas du tout la même chose, mais enfin, on se sent très responsable, on sent qu'on a un paquebot en face de soi. Une fille, c'est quelque chose, c'est une montagne, quoi.
When I look back on Summerhill, you know, when I think of the feeling it conjures up and the ideas, the first ideas that come to my head and my overall feeling of it was just like one beautiful endless summer with, you know, just being allowed to discover the other sex, you know, without any interference or really, you know, you shouldn't do that, you shouldn't do this, and just grow.
I've often given the illustration that some years ago I had a boy at a meeting, by the way, who fell in love with a new girl from London. They came to me and said, Neil, can we have a bedroom to ourselves? And I said, well, I'd gladly give you one. But I daren't. Why not? It's a free school, the girl said. I said, yes, but it's not a free civilization. If I gave you a bedroom to yourselves, I'm sure the ministry wouldn't approve of it. And I say, your mother, as you know, is scared of sex. If you got pregnant, to be a hell of a stink about it. I said, you can't afford contraceptives, and I daren't give you them. And I said, but Alma, I think that people should have a sex life when they want it, but you can't do it in a school.
And this film shows me dancing in boots. This pillow fight was staged for the benefit of the film. This is supposed to represent us having a lesson, but in fact lessons were never like that. They came and shot the film, and then when they went away to develop the film, they spoilt all the negatives, and so they needed to come back and do it all again. And because they had asked us to behave in a manner which was not natural, the pillow fight and the lesson were not how Summerhill would have been, and it interrupted the running of the school. The children were rather unhappy about going through all this again. So we held a general meeting and discussed it in detail and took a vote on whether Pathé should be allowed to come back and make the film. And it was passed fairly narrow, by a narrow majority as far as I remember. But it was passed they'd be allowed to come back, so they did.
And you voted for them to come back?
Yes, I voted for them to come back.
Almost the whole life of the school is organised around the meetings on Fridays and Saturdays, which bring together both children and adults.
Where he buys them from, because they need them, I think.
An elected chairman leads the discussions and keeps order. All the community's problems, conflicts or demands, all infringements and sanctions, and all the laws governing the life of the school are open to discussion and put to a vote. Everyone, children and adults, has one vote. If need be, a third party, known as an ombudsman, can speak on behalf of those children who desire it.
The meetings were absolutely fundamental to life at Summerhill, even though they only happened sort of once, twice a week. They coloured every moment of every day. If we saw something happening that we didn't like, some older child riding their bike in the house or doing something we felt was dangerous, like breaking a milk bottle, we could say, hey, stop doing that. And if the older child didn't, we could say, well, we'll bring you up in the meeting. If you don't do that, I'm going to bring you up. And so this meant that every child had tremendous power.
Meeting come to order! Shut up! Shut up! Shut it!
I'm bringing up Chris for harassing you, and every time I see him, he says Julio or stuff like that. And I always say stop, stop, stop. He never stops.
Look, Matthew. Yeah. First, I'm bringing you up. No. I lent Carmen my gun, and then she gave it to him, and he just threw it in the bushes or something, and he said, good. When I told him I was bringing him up, he said, good. I didn't try and look for it.
Okay, the rule case against Lee for Dalma. Dalma was standing in the queue for lunch. Apparently Lee just came running past and kind of kicked him in the stomach. And it hurt by the sounds of it.
On te demandait de prendre part et ça te forçait, ça te mettait devant toi-même à... Qu'est-ce que tu penses de cette situation? Et ça te faisait poser des questions à toi-même pour voir où était la justice.
Ollie, last night someone took Henry's bike and he found it this morning outside by the pegs, trashed generally. The back wheel was totally buckled up or something like that. The back wheel was totally knackered, really, and he was really a bit pissed off about it, obviously. Yeah. I don't know what to do about it.
Josh?
Has anybody who knows what they're talking about looked at it?
Not really. I mean, maybe you could have a look at it, Josh.
Matthew?
Yeah, I've seen it. The frame where the wheel's attached onto is bent. And the wheel's buckled a bit.
Okay. Roland?
Well, this is really terrible. It's like an awful thing. So he really likes writing his fine. For somebody to break it up like that, we ought to find out who did it and see if we can find him.
Stop it. Josh?
Yeah, there's nothing actually like substantially wrong with it. It's just been kicked about a bit, and it can be fixed in about 5 minutes. So.
Well, I sort of tried to kick the wheel back into place, and then I rode it, and it just sort of went back to just being buckled again.
Right.
Justin?
Well, apart from whoever did it, I propose that the community fund pays to get it mended and pays Josh to mend it straight away. If you want to do it. So.
Yeah.
That's not against anything else.
Right. All in favour, the community funds pays to get it mended by Josh. All against? Carried.
Tout le monde montait à bicyclette. Et à un moment, il manquait des valves pour les roues. Alors, c'est Aki qui prenait les valves sur la bicyclette de l'autre. Alors, toutes les semaines, quelqu'un arrivait, on m'a chipé les valves de ma bicyclette. Et finalement, le meeting a décidé, bon, c'est simple, on achète deux ou trois paires. Et celui qui en manque, on va le distribuer. Et comme ça, ce sera fini, parce qu'il y en aura assez pour tout le monde. Mais ça a pris quelques semaines avant d'avoir l'idée.
I had bitten a friend of mine very badly on her arm, and there was a special meeting called about this because this was felt to be just completely out of order, too aggressive. And I can remember being sort of fearful that I was being, you know, the subject of a special meeting. But like I said before, just also very glad that the problem was being dealt with, that the community were focusing on me as a young child with a difficulty. And I can remember somebody turning to me and saying, another child saying to me, but why do you bite your best friend? And I just said, I don't know. And it really made me think, to try and think why I was doing this. And that was quite helpful. You know, it made me conscious of what I was doing. And I could feel a tremendous sense of concern from the community that I was doing this.
Okay, this is closed. Zoe?
And it really made you very conscious of trying to look for positive solutions in life and not to be condemning or just punitive. It never worked. If you just treated children like that, they would just continue with that activity. So children could see that it didn't work.
I mean, you hear children say things like, well, so-and-so did that, but he's having a bad time at the moment. Something's happened at home or whatever. And that's absolutely, oh, right, okay, well, we'll leave that then. And the sensitivity of the community that's expressed through the meeting, I think, is one of its huge strengths.
May I ask what the object is of throwing bricks? I mean, what's the point in doing it? Gavin, what is the point of throwing bricks, stones, etc. last night at work? Okay, well, I mean...
You said that there's no point in throwing stones at some definite object in the hockey field. What's the point of throwing them in any place?
Kevin, sit down.
It's no fun doing it like that. Why is it fun doing it in any way? What's the pleasure you get out of it while you do it?
I don't think that's terribly important, but I'll explain it since you asked. And I say it's like throwing a cricket ball or baseball. Something particular. There's no enjoyment to get out of throwing something.
Are there any proposals? What are the chickens? Okay, well, I'll take the three there are.
One is that if they do it again, they're fined 6 pence. And one is that they can throw stones behind the carriages.
All in favor that they are fined 6 pence. All in favor that they can only throw stones behind the carriages. And nowhere else. Well, that's carried. Anything else on the agenda?
And when I was at Summerhill, I was actually very shy. But eventually, yes, I plucked up the courage to say something, so I stick my hand up and sort of wait for the chairman to call my name, and then my heart would be like pumping again, boom, 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 boom. And so I'd say, this and that, I don't know what it may be, you know, and I'll say something, and the tension was high, because everyone was like, focus, you know. Suddenly, as my name was called, everyone sort of like turn around and look at you, think, wow. And then, you know, you say what you were going to say, and then they actually listen to you. I mean, so there's a lot of pressure, but when you do say something and it's over and done with, you feel really good.
I mean, I myself, I can remember, you know, shouting at somebody and bursting into tears and stomping off, you know. I think we've all had a go at that.
And afterwards, everything went back to normal?
That was normal. Yes, I mean, one of the advantages of living together 24 hours a day is that you can't put things away. They have to be dealt with.
Bring up Adam, Molly, Amadou, Valen, Josh, and now. We're waking me up. Now, want to sleep. Adam, like that. Amadou, like that.
I think that was being helpful.
Yeah, I suppose we did wake people up and we did make those, and that was wrong, but we did leg it down there because these guys were running around and they were probably making a lot more noise before we got there. They were.
Shut up! Adam, you guys started taking pictures of us. Shut the fuck up.
William?
I'm just saying.
And also, maybe Tom doesn't know about all the other times you've woken people up. So he doesn't know. So maybe he just thinks for this time you should get half an hour work time.
There's no reason.
That's happened before as well.
There's absolutely no reason to bring all that in there.
Yes, there is.
This is about them waking Tom up, not about everything they might have done before this case.
Paul, that is stupid. They got strong warnings, which means that they get fined heavier next time. So you can shut up about stirring shit. That's got nothing to do with stirring shit.
Okay, we're supposed to get to each other. What if they get half an hour work fine? What if they get late night fine? What if they get breakfast fine? And what if they get breakfast fine for 3 days? What if they get half an hour work fine? What if they get late night fine? What if they get breakfast fine? What if they get breakfast fine for 3 days? What against all? It's carried they get breakfast fine for 3 days. Shh. Shut up.
The laws are made by everybody. And the child of 6 has the same vote as I have. And don't mention because I'm older that I have more power, because half the things I propose in meetings are outvoted, I'm glad to say, yeah.
Visitors were becoming a big problem. We were getting busloads of them, especially at the weekend. Neil wanted visitors to come to the meetings because he felt that that showed, you know, how the school worked, how the community worked. So we had a show of hands, and we outnumbered Neil, and he stormed out of the meeting. You know, he's furious, but because he believed, you know, that everyone had an equal vote, he had to go along with it. And so we voted for visitors to be banned, you know, from the meeting, and he was really angry, but he left it at that.
We had all our food, waiting for our food. We used to grab our plates, and then we used to go and sit down.
Throw butter at the ceiling.
And then we used to put on our fork the butter, and we used to go ding, and it used to stick on the ceiling. And the ceiling was completely covered in butter.
That's right. When someone behaved in an antisocial way at Summerhill, there was a tendency for this to come brought up at the meeting, for a law to be passed saying, thou shalt not do behaviour X which annoys other people. gradually over the years, the number of rules got longer and longer and longer and more, until nobody could remember what all the rules were. And so when this happened, someone would propose, we abolish all of the rules and start again. And this is what happened.
Got pretty shaky because suddenly, you know, you'd abandon a load of rules because you sort of, you know, you were kids and you thought, oh, why do we want bedtime rules? And so you'd vote for them all to, you know, go. No one would have any bedtimes. Great, you thought. And then after, you know, 2 weeks, you were screaming out to go to bed and have a decent night's sleep because everyone was playing their stereos around you and things. And so in the end, I can remember, you know, someone bringing it up, you know, we want bedtime set again for all different ages, different times. And when it was finally passed, there was like a cheer from all the other, you know, from all the kids, because they knew that was the way they were going to get their lives back to normal and get some decent sleep.
When I was younger, I must have been about, I don't know, 9 or 10, the bigger children decided to abandon the meeting completely and form a dictatorship. And I can remember being so utterly terrified of this. Not that they would hurt us or any of that kind of stuff, but that we had literally lost our voice. And as a child who was used to always being heard, the sense that you were no longer going to be heard was, oh, terrible. I can remember being in tears about it, you know, with fear. But it didn't last very long. I think they lasted a few days before some of the older girls took them in hand and sorted them out.
You don't just obey rules because they're rules. You know why you're obeying them in a way. And you don't resent having to do it because you can see, you know what a society's like with no rules because at times you've lived in one and it's bloody hell. The rubbish builds up round your ears, no washing gets done and no one goes to bed, so... do you think one learns more about life from the meetings than in class?
Yes. Yes, I do, really. Not just from the meetings, from living with other people is really important. It isn't just the meeting, it's what the meeting means. It's the meeting as a forum for us to express ourselves and to be able to take problems to the meeting, to have them dealt with, which is all part of learning to live with other people, which I think is most important. We are human beings, and if we can't function as human beings, if we don't know how to live with other human beings, then we fail.
All schools in Great Britain are controlled by the Ministry of Education, and all of them are subject to inspection. Why should I allow my school to be judged according to official criteria which are different from mine? Summerhill is above all a place created for living in, one which refuses to be judged by a group of people who think in terms of knowledge, teaching methods and discipline.
Attendance rates at lessons are poor, and pupils' progress is slow. The curriculum is too narrow. The school has a strong and distinctive ethos emphasizing individual development. Pastoral care and relationships are good. However, guidance by adults of pupils is sparing. Although attainment in individual subjects in GCSE examinations is sometimes creditable, the restricted number of subjects taken by pupils means that their general standard of achievement is low. Did you get bored at Summerhill?
Really bored. Bored, stupid. So bored. Really. Especially at weekends, you know. We used to just traipse around from staff room to staff room, knocking on the door, saying, "Can we come in your room?" And then they'd say, "No, you can't come in right now." We'd go traipsing off to another staff room, knock on the door, "Can we come in?" We're just so bloody bored. Unbelievable. The staff at Summerhill, when they go there, they kind of often go for their own reasons. I mean, I think many people read Neil's books or become interested in the ideas and kind of hope that, you know, their own emotional and psychological prayers will be answered. In fact, we didn't really see ourselves as children at all. We saw ourselves as adults, as the same, and that adults, in their turn, sort of became children. They kind of regressed to our level. You know, there's never any praise. There's never any praise. There's never any sort of idea of building confidence, if you like, in the sort of the straight way, the way we do it out here. You know, we do it in quite a sort of simple, straightforward way. You know, we give people, we sort of praise our children and encourage them to develop and encourage them to feel good about the things that they can do. You know, I mean, I suppose I'm a great believer in sort of boundaries and pathways, or clear pathways. You know, that, I mean, you just, you know, you can't really just put a 4-year-old in the middle of a field and say, be yourself. Or even a 13-year-old, or, you know, at any age, be yourself.
After Summerhill, Vivian attended a dancing school and danced professionally for 2 years before giving it up. Her lack of formal qualifications and education made life difficult afterwards. She is now studying at a horticultural school to become a landscape gardener.
Freedom is indivisible. It means you must never influence the choices children make. It's all or nothing. If trust in the child is not absolute, the principle of Summerhill, the principle of freedom of choice, loses all value. There was a boy at Summerhill who never went to a single class and who left the school scarcely knowing how to read or write.
I was one of the few pupils at Summerhill that didn't attend lessons. I chose not to attend because I was not interested in it. I was very good at pottery, carpentry, those sort of things. I had a lot of confidence in my own ability to cope with the world through being able to do things with my hands. So when I left Summerhill at the age of 15, I could barely read or write, and I had no real idea what I was going to do or what I wanted to do.
On leaving Summerhill, Freya spent 5 years hitchhiking around the world twice. After a stay in Europe, he sold jeans in Turkey, his blood in Kuwait, worked in a kibbutz in Israel, was a film extra in India, worked in the mines in Australia, happened across the carnival in Rio, gave conferences on Summerhill in California, went to prison in Canada, and finally ended up taking part in humanitarian movements in Pakistan and India. In short, he visited over 90 countries without ever living through a single winter.
Every time I crossed the border, I would have to fill out a rather large form that required my name and my dress and my age and what language I spoke, what religion I was, etc. And I learned to do these forms, write these forms in such a way, in such bad handwriting, that nobody could actually, even if I had spelt it correctly, they wouldn't have been able to read it. And most customs officials, because they were, say, in Arab countries, couldn't read Latin script anyway, it didn't make much difference. But that was my only real drawback. I had, during this period, taught myself how to read and write correctly. I suppose it first came home when I was in Japan, and I got a job being an English conversation teacher to scientists from a soap factory. And it really, I was explaining what my family does, what my father does, and they couldn't understand what a caravan. My father was a caravan manufacturer, and so I had to sort of, they asked me to spell it for them. And at that point I really got fed up, and I thought, God, I can't really spell this very well, and I'm not sure how to spell it. So that really made me decide that I would, you know, teach myself how to read and write. I found that quite embarrassing. So after that, it took me about 3 months. I got a dictionary, and I started to read books and just did it myself. And by the time I got back to the UK, I was quite, you know, normal, I suppose.
How do you feel now about Neil letting you go with such minimal qualifications?
Yeah, well, I'm often puzzled about that, both to do with Neil and my father, in fact. I don't think I would, well, I would be very worried if my own children grew up not reading and writing. So I've often wondered about how they could have done that. And I don't really understand it. But neither Neil or my father seem to have much concern about it. So I think maybe they just felt that I would do it eventually. I think Neil always said that I will learn eventually when I want to do it, and he was actually correct.
It's a cinema.
Oh yes, there it is. That's it. We used to sit on the steps.
We used to sit through the program twice.
Sometime. Can you remember a film that was played there? Humphrey Bogart. That was the time. Yes.
Well, no, endless.
Errol
Flynn.
Flynn. Errol Flynn.
Yeah, I'm sure we saw them all.
Weren't you surprised by the rather conventional world of university?
In some respects, yes. There were some university students who behaved in a very immature manner, in a way that Summerhillians would have lived out by playing at the age of 11, 12, 13.
And also completely obsessed with the opposite sex, and had a sort of a mean attitude to adults. They looked at them as, it was like them and us, and everything was done behind the adults' backs.
From Summerhill I went to art school, and people would sort of resist doing the work, or resist what the teachers said, and it was very us and them, and that obviously for me was very odd to respond like that. I couldn't see the purpose of that.
Rebellion seems, at that age, is the way that you gain respect from your peers, because you're seen as perhaps empowered by that rebellion, as somebody who's taking control of their lives and going against the flow, and therefore somebody who sticks out and somebody who gains respect. But at Summerhill, that's not the case. A rebellious person is not respected. Is tried to they try to change that attitude. You try to make them understand that is not a productive way to live in a society.
After Summerhill, Warraby went to college and took his A-levels. For the moment, he sells men's clothes in a smart area of London to pay the rent. But his passion is still music, and he hopes to achieve his dream, to become a professional musician.
It all started there, and that is probably the most vivid memory I've got. Just sort of everybody sort of saying, go, 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 and that is really the trigger. If people sort of said, oh no, go home, don't do that, I probably wouldn't have bothered, I thought, oh no, but people encouraged you there.
Lucy knows exactly what she wants to do, work in the fashion industry. However, after Summerhill, she decided to devote an entire year to her parents, so that she could take the time to get to know them better. She is currently attending courses at art school. She's already started making scarves and hats.
I think Summerhill taught me how to live with other people in a confined space. I think you learnt to share things and to help. It sounds very sort of hippie trippy, but like help other people and get along with other people. And take responsibility for yourself and for the things that are going on around you, the people that are around you.
After his A-levels, Dominic specialised in biology and is now a laboratory assistant. He's not obsessed by the idea of a career, preferring to live life his own way.
It taught me to value law or value order, value a true democracy, and I think I'd be continually frustrated by the disempowerment the individual has in this country. And that's why Summerhill is so good, because it allows the individual to speak for itself and allows the individual to alter or to influence the community very directly.
What did you want to do when you left Summerhill?
I wanted to own a Citroen 2CV and have a pair of red kickers and be trendy and popular. That's what I wanted.
He has half won his bet. His kickers may not be red, but he does drive a 2CV. After his exams, he was unemployed for a while, hit by the recession. But shortly afterwards, he found a job as a technician in the physics laboratory of a well-known school in Manchester. Do Summerhill children manage to adapt better to crisis situations?
I mean, if a crisis comes up at Summerhill, you don't have adults take over. You deal with it yourself. And, you know, again, it's a learning thing. The more you deal with things yourself, the more you're capable of dealing with them in the future. It's like riding a bike. So I think, you know, emotionally they are better equipped to deal with that sort of thing.
After Summerhill, Danny did a PhD in educational science. She now works in medical training at a London hospital. Her job is to improve communication between doctors and patients.
Summerhill has given me the ability to talk at any level to anybody. I'm not afraid. They are merely people, and I'm merely a person, and we're going to have a conversation. And I would say that gives me an edge, actually. Not the ideas I have, not what I want to say, but the fact that I'm unafraid to say it.
As well as his passion for music and comic strips, Albert publishes books on A.S. Neil. In association with other teachers, he has opened an archive devoted to alternative education worldwide.
I look upon it as a time when I had a training in relationships, in having friends, in investing in people, and in accepting people with all their difficulties as, on some level, family, as your responsibility.
But above all, Albert has met up again with Popsy after their separation on leaving Summerhill 25 years ago. In the interim, Popsy had bought a farm, wanting to live a simple life. Today, she is content to cultivate her garden.
I think this has always made me feel very, very strong in my inner life. I mean, I think I probably have felt at a disadvantage in terms of education and worldly things, going out getting jobs. But it's never really mattered to me that much. You know, I've recognized it, you know, that I do feel handicapped. But I think to have a sort of an inner strength and a certainty about who you are is much more important.
Freya now has a degree in economics and is an industrial consultant giving advice in many countries in the Third World. He is also increasingly involved in the management of community-based projects in Britain.
I think it taught me a lot of confidence. I think Summerhill gave me a lot of strength to trust in my own judgment and trust my own feelings.
At Summerhill, Keith wanted to be a doctor. He went to college, where he completed a 2-year course in just 1 year. He then went on to university. After qualifying as a doctor, he carried out research in chest medicine. With the help of a grant, he set up an institute for research into heart and lung diseases. Now retired, his hobbies are archaeology, fishing, and playing the clarinet, a pleasure he first discovered at Summerhill.
I think the difference in Summerhill is to understand and have lived by the principles of freedom and the tolerance that comes with that. I think really that's the extra special thing. and understanding how children need to be brought up, being happy while they're being brought up.
After leaving Summerhill, Frances worked as a paediatric nurse before emigrating to Mauritius with her husband, where she developed a family planning association and brought up her 6 children. Her passion for patchwork has stayed with her since Summerhill.
Qu'est-ce que ça vous a appris, l'école, cette école-là?
La tolérance et la possibilité d'être moi-même. Malgré, en grandissant, j'ai dû ressentir, parce qu'il y a des pressions sociales, une fille doit être ceci, ne pas être cela, doit absolument, impérativement être jolie, etc. Et à l'époque, de ne pas trop être brillante, de ne pas trop chercher à faire une carrière. Mais malgré ça, je ne dépends pas de l'opinion des autres. Je peux être moi-même, et s'ils désapprouvent, tant pis.
After attending art school, John started producing comics and children's books. Today his work is published in Britain and abroad, and he is one of the leading figures in the world of comics.
It's always been considered that people who went to Summerhill lived in this strange kind of detached paradise away from society, and how on earth would they fit into normal life when they left? It didn't worry me at all.
What did Summerhill bring you?
Well, I was happy. I was very happy for 5 years or whatever.
Interior decorator, antique dealer and designer, Léonard, the little Frenchman, enjoys recognition and appreciation in Britain. Back in his native Provence, he indulges his love of painting.
Quand je suis allé à Summerhill, j'étais hésitant, je n'avais pas confiance en moi et j'en suis sorti d'une pièce. Oui, d'une pièce.
En résumé, c'est ce que Summerhill t'a appris.
Mais on ne peut pas dire que j'ai appris quelque chose dans ce sens-là. C'est un changement qui s'est passé profond. Ce n'est pas appris, c'est vécu. Now, I remember the station here once. A little boy called Philip. Remember Philip? He was screaming because he didn't want to go back home. He was terrified of going home to his mum and dad. That was at the station.
Really?
Yeah. He was screaming and saying, "No, I don't want to go. I want to stay at Summerhill."
Huh. There it is, look.
Oh, yes, there is the place.
Just like.
Now, I can't remember these letters being so wide.
There we are.
Right, so this is the... I wonder if in 100 years, John, the kids will still be on their bikes. Because 50 years ago, they were on their bikes.
It wasn't 50, was it? Yeah.
It says 50 years ago. 51?
God.
97, it's 48 years ago?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, I think we can get out now.